Okay, so now for something different. This talk is going to be about a very new religious, or maybe it cannot even be labeled a religious community, but it's a new community, approximately 10 years old, and it's referred to as Tulpamancy, and it's worldwide community, but focused and centered in the United States of America. And I will present this, say something of this about the main concepts, how to make a tulpa, the history of Tulpamancy, some psychological comments, only very brief, and then something about the social context. Okay, so basically, the community of Tulpamancy centers on the concept of tulpa. And tulpa refers to what we may call an imaginary friend. An imaginary friend that has been conjured through certain techniques and which is believed to have gained independence and its own sort of agency. And Tulpamancy is the name of the movement. A tulpamancer is a member of the movement. Tulpa forcing is the practice of conjuring a tulpa. Okay? And there are in this movement, which is an online movement, it's almost completely online in different internet communities, and people use their aliases. And one of the most important aliases is someone called the Fuck Man, spelled F-A-Q man, and he is one of those who provided a guide to how to produce a tulpa. There are many such guides. This is the most influential one, the first one. And what you have to do then is to spend 100 hours, 1 hour per day, 1 to 3 hours per day over then an extended period of time, visualizing or imagining very sort of in a very concentrated way, visualizing your tulpa, your imaginary friend. And you can pick a shape, whatever shape you like. You can pick like a squirrel or a hedgehog or a blue cat or anything, or a human shape or whatever. And you have to sit there and in a very focused way, concentrate on how this tulpa looks, how it feels to touch it, its smell, its gestures, its personality. You should imagine up to 30 different personality traits and speak it in your imagination to your tulpa. So you can say, let's say hedgehog, my hedgehog, your blue hedgehog, you're that kind of person who likes to stay by yourself sometimes, and sometimes you can laugh very loudly, you can cry, you're sensitive, you're an introvert, you have a fluid gender identity, something like this. And you speak it to the tulpa. And what happens then, after 50 hours approximately, according to this guidance, these tulpamancers experience that the tulpa wakes up. So it means that in your inner vision, you have your imaginary friend, your tulpa, and suddenly it will do something that is independent of your sort of instructions. It would say something of its own, it would walk away or do something unexpected. And this is also felt to cause headache or some kind of physical symptoms. And then you will know that you're on the right path, and you will continue doing the tulpa forcing to create this really real imaginary friend, and which you can then impose on reality. So let's say I would have a tulpa, I could have it placed on this chair, it would sit there, it would sort of talk to me, it would engage with me, but of course it is a product of my mind, and this is, everyone in this movement knows that it's a product of my mind, but it's believed to have its own agency, which means that I can also then practice what is called switching. And that would mean to let this tulpa enter my body and take over. So for instance, I would learn then to have my tulpa come into my body and move my hand like this. And suddenly maybe I am the tulpa speaking, and now I'm David again, and now I'm the tulpa. So this is what they do. So something about the history of this movement. As with many esoteric practices of modern times, it begins with Annie Besant and Leadbeater and the Theosophical movement. They wrote a book in 1905 called Thought Forms, which described the esoteric practice of conjuring real things by thinking, basically. And now these ideas were taken up by another theosophist or another person inspired by theosophy, Alexandra David Neal, French, who traveled to Tibet. She was like an adventurer. She traveled to Tibet. And in 1929, she wrote a book called Mystique et Magicien du Tibet, which was translated 2 years after, called With Mystics and Magicians in Tibet. And David Neal has some strange experiences in Tibet. And as you know, in Tibetan Buddhism, there are many practices of visualization, where you make sort of meditation techniques where you visualize different things. And she was interested in this, and she also saw a number of strange things. For instance, she met this artist, and behind him she could see this big demon behind him, and when she touched it, it sort of dissolved as if made by smoke. And then she learned that this artist had actually been painting a painting of this demon, had been sort of engaged in thinking about its shape, and then it sort of got this physical shape external. So this is sort of the magical practice that she noticed, and that she construed in light of this thought form tradition from theosophy. And the word there was strulpa, which was a Tibetan word, which then became tulpa. Now, this theosophical tradition then enters what can be referred to as the American cosmic. This is a very interesting book by someone called Pasulka, a study religion scholar in the US. And the American cosmic then refers to this sort of fictional, folkloristic American tradition, where you have things such as Bigfoot, UFOs, secret government conspiracies. And it's sort of fictional and for fun, but it's also somehow connected to real beliefs and, you know, there's something out there kind of feeling. There's one man called John Keel who in 1975 wrote a book called The Mothman Prophecies. And the Mothman is one of those folkloristic monsters that they have in the US. And it's sort of a flying, shadowy shape of a flying creature, which is believed then to have appeared in the US, warning for some imminent catastrophe with a bridge falling down. And there's the idea in this Mothman prophecies that the Mothman was conjured by the fears of people. So this is basically the tulpa idea. And this idea then comes into fiction in the 1990s. So we have several horror movies and also other movies where the idea is spoken of as people are so afraid of something that it becomes real. So, for instance, this New Nightmare, which is Terror on Elm Street, the sort of follow-up on Terror on Elm Street. This Freddy Krueger, famous monster guy, he appears because they are so afraid of him, they fantasize about him, they imagine him coming, and they're so afraid that finally he becomes real. And this then is the cultural idea, primarily in the US, but also in other countries, which then hits the internet when internet comes. And on the internet, there are these online communities, and this is when I really felt like a complete boomer when I was trying to research this, because I had to sort of consult my teenage kids to how to navigate these worlds. But there are all of these internet forums where people discuss all kinds of strange things, and the one channel called 4chan is the craziest of them all, my son tells me, where you get the really strange stuff. And so tulpa is something that's being discussed in these channels, and here a strange transformation takes place. So in the beginning, it is basically a type of creepypasta, and this means it's like a horror story that's spread around the internet. But over the course of time, it suddenly moves into another domain, surprisingly, namely that of My Little Pony. And My Little Pony was a type of toys that they sold in the 80s, and there are generations of My Little Pony, different films, different TV series. And the fourth generation of My Little Pony was a TV series then called My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. So there's this connection between friendship and magic, and this, surprisingly, gets a community of followers and fans which are adult men. And they refer to themselves as bronies, bros who like ponies. No, I'm not. This is not. I'm not trying to make something funny here. This is true, and it's an interesting interesting movement. And in this community, the brony community, where they're actually engaging in this fandom kind of way with My Little Pony, and they go and they dress up as My Little Ponies, and they have their own favorite My Little Ponies, comes this idea of Tulpamancy. And this Falkman that I referred to is one brony who comes up with the first instruction of how to construct a tulpa. And they are still, the tulpa community comes from this community, and the biggest site is tulpa.info. Okay, and they have all these chat communities on different sites. I will not be brief about the psychology, but of course we have heard there are certain sort of prerequisites for this movement to be possible, I suppose. And one is the human capacity for plurality, as we've heard, having plural personalities, as we have heard many examples of. Also our capacity for supernatural experiences. I'm not saying that these are real in an ontological sense, but humans have the capacity to experience the world in ways which cannot be explained. We can feel smells of people who are not there, for instance. There are many such experiences that people can have. So the actual experience of an external blue hedgehog is possible given the sort of what we know about how our psyche works. But more important when it comes to explain this movement is the social context and the historical context in which it appears. So, and one of the features here is anonymity. Because these young people, young men or women, and non-binary people who are part of this movement, they are always anonymous. All the speakers in all these chat forums have their sort of internet nicknames. And there is this psychological studies that indicate that something happens to personality when you are in anonymity. So for instance, if I think of myself and how my person, and I would like to hear your psychologists talk about this later perhaps, or maybe address this theme, but if my person is shaped by the social interactions that I have. So me, David, I get people liking me and disliking me and criticizing me, and by these social interactions, my person is sort of shaped, my sense of being a continuous self in the world. But what if it's always my alias, Pink Unicorn, who gets the criticism, gets the friends, gets the criticism, gets the love, gets the confirmation? Well, perhaps it has been suggested then this affects the sense of self that comes with my sort of physical person. So this anonymity that is so characteristic of this movement, I think, is quite important. And so is the loneliness, because as you may know, loneliness among young adults is growing rapidly in the world. And of course, imaginary friends is something that many of us have had, perhaps as children. But if loneliness is there, almost complete loneliness, well, the need for them is even more strong. Of course, we also have all the internet, the technology that makes augmented reality possible. Such games as, for instance, Pokemon Go, where you sort of augment another reality upon this reality, helps to think of this as something that is a natural thing to do. In combination then with the old esoteric practices and these realistic fiction movies and the creepypastas and all of these things, it creates a situation where reality, as we know it, at least in sort of commonsensical, modernist kind of way, is somehow dissolved. And I just want to end with two quotes from one of these chat groups, just to show you how real this is. Okay, so Attiline says, I can't even imagine myself having sex with a physical partner anymore. It's just not the same. And nothing replaces the raw emotional connection, the excitement, the intimacy, the love, the happiness, the lust, the pleasure that I experience in sex with them, the tulpas. There's been times when we are so intimate together and so much love has been expressed in things as simple as making out or cuddling that we've been brought to tears. Okay, so it's real experience, and there's a sexual aspect to this. And then someone else gets annoyed with this comment and says this. This is Avon Laser says, please don't tell me that you're creating a tulpa to have sex with it. That's a horrid thing to do. You create it to love and desire you. How is that not sex slavery? It has no choice. This is a sick and evil thing to do to any entity, especially one that is basically your child. But then Even Laser comes to realizes and adds a second comment, which is this. Now, one that develops that way later after becoming a person in its own right is probably fine in its morality, since they are making choices on their own at that point. But it's still a bit incestuous. Okay, that was it. Thank you very much.
David, a few decades ago, there was a craze about Second Life.
Yes.
Where you created your avatar, and you interacted in the same space. Your avatar, my avatar, interacted with yours. Do these tulpas, do they sort of play on the same play field physically, or?
Yes, well, that's a good question. I don't think so, but they have something called walk-ins. And a walk-in is you have your tulpamancer and you have your tulpa, and you can have, of course, several tulpas, and suddenly another tulpa just enters your world. That's a walk-in. That is something that is known to, they believe, can happen. And also there's this idea then, which connects to the Mothman, that these tulpas, they are actually real. I mean, they are not any longer connected to your soul or your mind or something like this. They are real entities in the world. They have their own rights. As we saw in this comment, they have their own agency, their own ideas, their own beliefs and everything. And they can also take some kind of physical shape, as in this, the Tibetan traditions of conjuring something that becomes physically real, as with the Mothman. So they are believed to live in this world with us, but as some kind of conjured
but they all regard as your double. I mean,
well, they're double. Actually,
I can't snatch your tulpa. And
well, I think the tulpa. Then they would say, well, my tulpa, if it's a real tulpa, it can be your tulpa. It's its choice. It's consensual.
How much will artificial intelligence have an impact on this?
Yes, I think it has a great. I don't know. Maybe it can be used in different ways too. But I think the technological situation, I mean, this is a fringe movement. There are some figures with 40,000 people involved or something, but it says something about an understanding of reality that young people actually live with. I mean, of what is right and how is reality created, what is real, what is not real, who is an agent, who is a non-agent, and so on. So I think it's sort of indicative of how we can construe sort of the cultural situation for the internet generation at large.
What were they doing before? Were they trying hallucinogenic mushrooms?
No, I think they are normal young kids. It could be your kids or grandkids.
Have you met anyone live?
Yes.
And it's
normal people. They are normal people. It's the internet generation.
After this afternoon, I say, what is normal?
Yeah. I mean, that would be a comment, because now we've heard all these papers, and this, you could say, oh, this is crazy, the reality is dissolving, but maybe this is just going back on track for humanity, because we had this sort of double souls all the way along. So then back to Socrates, maybe.